I've always believed that the last substantial area of development or improvement in terms of radically improving people's lives is the judiciary, because there are many aspects of it which are very conducive to a radical transformation that would substantially improve the way people live and the practical application of their human rights. An important aspect of all of this is that the institution, as far back as people can look in terms of modern civilization, the last serious set of changes that have been implemented were implemented almost 800-900 years ago. I mean, there's been continuous development since, but it's not been a radical change in the way the transaction dynamics of work. It is an implicit presumption that for courtrooms to function, judges need to effectively be regarded as something that they're clearly not. They have to be higher than everybody else in the courtroom, and they have to be not just respected, but there's a sort of mythology that has been developed to make the court process work. There are a number of reasons for that, which we'll talk about later when we work on specific things. But essentially, my motivation in getting involved with this, first and foremost, is that I strongly feel that a lot of the mythology around the judiciary is ridiculous. What I mean by that is that, for instance, there is this presumption that judges are certain things, like they're academic, they're knowledgeable, they're sincere, and they are well-intentioned. Not just that, but they have to be like the epitome of all of those traits. At any given time, you have to work with the presumption that they are the best embodiments of those traits in any given courtroom at any given time. That's, demonstrably preposterous for a number of reasons. But it's not just that there are some exceptions to the thing. It's that the whole concept is ludicrous, because the way in which judges are chosen is not even aimed at achieving that. So judges are not people who are chosen because they have the highest IQs or because they have the greatest knowledge of something. The selection process doesn't require that. It has never required that. It is not necessity either for them to be that way. But somehow there is a presumption that for the judicial process to function, one has to accept that is the case. It leads to a number of issues. The dishonesty of it is an important issue. And then the other aspect is that to the extent that those things were necessary previously, they are no longer necessary. What I mean by that, very briefly, is that there was a time when it was necessary that people have no doubt about a judge's fidelity to the law or their skill or whatever, because everybody had guns and the government advantage over regular citizen was not that much. Back in 1800 or early 1900, when guns were very common, and the police department will have 20, 30, or some dozen officers with the same guns that people would have, mobs could easily take over. So it was very important that the public resentment of law and order did not linger, because there could be armed uprisings that could take place very easily. That's no longer the case. The other thing, when democracy was in its early stages, there was a concern that strong political figures could effectively become dictators if there wasn't an effective judiciary to check them. So because of that, there were a number of purported checks and balances put into place, because that way it was thought that the judiciary could be independent. They're no longer relevant because of the way in which things have evolved and the level of advancement that we are in as a society. And more importantly, the tools that we have to check conduct. Like, you wouldn't need the same sort of things that you did before because there are better ways of checking things. And the problem is that even though everybody would accept that, it's just an area where no one is really interested in doing anything about things because it's a complicated thing. Another aspect of the hypocrisy in the judicial process, that on one hand, the judiciary is presented as independent, but they're appointed by the executive, they're funded by the executive, and all their functioning is governed by the legislature, which again is influenced by the executive.